I received the invitation to my parents' home for what Mom called a special family dinner. When Jason, my twin brother, texted that he had big news to share, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. My recent divorce from Sarah still left a bitter taste, and family gatherings always carried an undercurrent of judgment. Dad never missed an opportunity to remind me how disappointing my artistic career was compared to Jason's business success. Still, blood is blood, and I decided to go support my brother. If you have experienced family favoritism, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know where you are watching from, and if you have ever felt like the black sheep in your family. Growing up with Jason always felt like living in a shadow. From our earliest memories, he was the golden child, the one who made our parents beam with pride. We looked identical physically, but in our parents' eyes, we were worlds apart in value. Jason excelled in football and baseball, winning trophies that Dad proudly displayed in a special cabinet in the living room. I still remember standing in that living room as a 10-year-old, staring at the empty shelf Dad had designated for my accomplishments. It remained empty, even after I won first place in the state art competition. Our high school years only widened the gap. Jason became captain of the football team, dated the most popular girls, and maintained a solid B average that satisfied our parents. I poured myself into art classes, stayed up late, sketching in my room, and graduated with honors. At our graduation dinner, Dad toasted Jason for 30 minutes, recounting his athletic accomplishments and praising his acceptance to our father's alma mater. For me, he simply said, "At least Alfred graduated," before quickly moving on. College further separated our paths. Jason followed the plan our father laid out, majoring in business, with a focus on finance, preparing to eventually join the family investment firm. I chose the state university with the best fine arts program, studying painting and sculpture against my parents' wishes. Their disappointment manifested in reduced financial support. While they paid Jason's full tuition housing and gave him a generous allowance, I received only partial tuition and worked part-time jobs to cover the rest of my expenses. Despite the struggles, college became my sanctuary. For the first time, I found people who appreciated my creativity and passion. Professor Williams became the mentor I never had, encouraging me to develop my unique style that blended abstract elements with photorealistic details. By senior year, my thesis exhibition garnered attention from local galleries, and I graduated with a job offer from a small but respected art studio in the city. When I told my parents about my first paid position as an artist, Mom simply sighed, and Dad laughed. "Art is a hobby, Alfred, not a career. You will be living in a basement apartment eating ramen, while your brother makes 6 figures his first year out of college," he said, not even trying to hide his disdain. That night I promised myself I would prove them wrong someday, though deep down I wondered if I was making a mistake. Jason and I both moved to the city after college, though our lives rarely intersected. He began working at an investment bank, quickly climbing the corporate ladder with our father's connections smoothing his path. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 other artists, and worked 14-hour days between my studio job and my personal projects. On the rare occasions we met for coffee, Jason seemed genuinely interested in my work, though he always ended our conversations with offers to help me find a real job through his network. Then I met Sarah at a gallery opening where one of my smaller pieces was being displayed. She was vibrant, confident, and saw something in my work that made her eyes light up. Unlike my family, she never questioned my career choice. She believed in me unconditionally, staying up late to discuss color theory and composition, helping me frame pieces for submissions, and celebrating every small victory in my career. We married after 2 years of dating in a small ceremony that my parents attended with tight smiles and whispered comments about when I would grow up and provide properly for my new family. Sarah defended me fiercely that day, telling my mother that art was not just a valid career but a necessary contribution to society. Mom never forgave her for that. The first year of marriage was beautiful despite our financial struggles. We converted half our tiny apartment into a studio space where I could work on commissions while Sarah built her career in marketing. But as my parents predicted, money became tight and the strain began to show. Sarah never complained directly, but I could feel her growing frustration when gallery owners rejected my work or when commissions fell through. 3 years into our marriage, the pressure became too much. Sarah's company offered her a promotion that required relocation to Chicago. I wanted to support her career, as she had supported mine, but leaving New York meant abandoning the connections I had slowly built in the art world. We argued for weeks, each conversation growing more bitter than the last. The final blow came when Sarah confessed that she was tired of living with the shadow of my family hanging over us. "Your parents never thought you were good enough, and now that doubt has infected you and us," she said the night she packed her bags. The divorce was quick but left me hollow. I moved to an even smaller apartment, threw myself into my work with renewed desperation, and avoided family gatherings for months. When I finally saw my parents again at Thanksgiving, Dad didn't ask how I was coping. Instead, he said, "This is what happens when you choose passion over practicality," as if my failed marriage was just another item on his list of my shortcomings. What my family didn't know was that my career had actually begun to gain momentum. A series of urban landscape paintings caught the attention of a prominent gallery owner, leading to my first solo exhibition. It was small but successful, selling enough pieces to clear my debt and put away savings for the first time in my adult life. Around the same time, a luxury hotel commissioned me to create a mural for their renovated lobby, a project that paid more than I had earned in the previous 2 years combined. I chose not to share these developments with my family. Years of dismissal had taught me that they would find ways to minimize my achievements or attribute them to luck rather than talent and hard work. So, I lived a double life, the struggling artist in my family's eyes, and the emerging talent in the art world. This divide grew wider when an international corporation commissioned a series of large-scale pieces for their new headquarters, a contract worth 6 figures that would change my financial situation permanently. The night before the family dinner where Jason would announce his engagement, I signed the contract for that commission but went to sleep in my shabby apartment, saving the news like a secret weapon I wasn't sure I would ever deploy. The evening of Jason's announcement arrived with perfect spring weather matching my brother's perpetually sunny circumstances. I parked my aging Honda between my father's Mercedes and my sister Amanda's Range Rover in the circular driveway of our childhood home. The sprawling colonial house looked immaculate as always, with fresh landscaping and a new coat of paint that probably cost more than my annual rent. Amanda and her husband Frank greeted me at the door, their 3 children running circles in the foyer. My youngest brother Brian stood in the living room with his girlfriend Tiffany, both clutching wine glasses and laughing with Jason. My twin looked happier than I had seen him in years, his arm wrapped around a beautiful woman I assumed was Stephanie, his girlfriend of 2 years. Mom Air kissed my cheek when I entered her eyes, quickly scanning my department store suit with barely concealed disappointment. Dad emerged from his study, nodding curtly in my direction before making a beeline for Jason, clapping him on the back with the proud gesture I had never received. "You clean up okay," Alfred Mom said, straightening my tie unnecessarily. "I heard about your divorce. Such a shame, but perhaps Sarah realized she needed someone more." She paused, searching for the right word established. Before I could respond, she turned to greet Stephanie properly, leaving me alone in the entryway. I grabbed a glass of wine from a passing server, one of several hired for the evening. The house had been transformed for the occasion, with flower arrangements on every surface and catering staff preparing an elaborate meal. Whatever Jason's announcement was, our parents had spared no expense to celebrate it. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier overhead. I sat between Brian and Amanda's oldest son, directly across from Jason and Stephanie, who kept exchanging secretive smiles. The conversation flowed around me, centered on Jason's recent promotion and the family's investment firm's expanding client list. Then came the moment that would change everything. After the main course, Jason stood up, tapping his glass gently. "I have an announcement to make," he said, beaming. "Stephanie and I are engaged." The room erupted in cheers. Stephanie blushed, showing off a diamond ring that caught the light spectacularly. I felt genuinely happy for my brother, rising to congratulate them both with a warm hug. "This calls for champagne," Dad announced, motioning for the servers, who quickly appeared with bottles of what I recognized as the vintage reserve he saved for truly special occasions. When everyone had a fresh glass, Dad remained standing, raising his flute high. "I would like to propose a toast to my son," he began, his voice carrying the authority of the patriarch he had always been. "Jason, you have made me proud in every way possible. Top of your class at business school, vice president at 30, and now engaged to this lovely, accomplished woman. His voice swelled with emotion that I had never heard directed at me. Then his gaze shifted, landing on me with laser focus. "Finally," he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical growl. "I have one son who is not a complete disappointment." He gestured toward me with his free hand. Unlike this pathetic excuse for a Harrington who cannot even keep a wife, a career painting pictures like a child while his brother builds a real future. The room fell silent except for a few uncomfortable coughs. I sat frozen, my champagne untouched, as Jason's smile faded. Stephanie looked mortified, her eyes darting between Jason and me, clearly expecting her new fiancé to intervene. He didn't. My mother, never one to miss an opportunity to twist the knife, placed her hand on Dad's arm in a show of solidarity. "You know, Harold," she said with a light laugh that did nothing to soften her words, "when we did the fertility treatments, the doctor asked if we wanted to select just one embryo." She sighed dramatically. "We should have listened. We knew even then which one would be the failure." I felt the blood drain from my face as laughter erupted around the table. Even Amanda, who occasionally showed me kindness, covered her mouth to hide her smile. Brian openly snickered, and Tiffany, having never met me before tonight, joined in as if this public humiliation was a family tradition she was eager to embrace. Most shocking were my niece and nephews, ages 8 to 12, pointing at me while laughing. Children learn cruelty from somewhere, and in our family that education started early. I looked at Jason, searching for any sign of the brother who had once shared a womb with me, who had shared childhood secrets and dreams before our paths diverged. His eyes met mine for a brief moment before darting away, his silence saying everything. In that moment, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life, and ultimately my family's. I placed my napkin gently on the table, rose to my feet, and raised my untouched champagne. "Congratulations, Jason and Stephanie," I said evenly. "I wish you both every happiness." With a small smile that cost me every ounce of dignity I possessed, I set down my glass and walked calmly from the room, ignoring my father's scoff and my mother's performative sigh. As I drove away from the house, I felt a strange lightness replace the familiar weight of inadequacy. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew I would never subject myself to their judgment again. That night, I began preparations to move into the loft space my new commission would easily pay for, and to build a life where I was valued for exactly who I was. The 6 months following that disastrous dinner transformed my life in ways I could never have imagined. The morning after, I signed a lease on a spacious loft in the Arts District, a place bathed in natural light with high ceilings perfect for my larger pieces. I moved in with my few possessions and set up a professional studio in the open space, finally having room to work on multiple projects simultaneously. My decision to cut contact with my family was immediate and complete. I changed my phone number, created a new email address, and instructed the few mutual acquaintances we shared not to provide my information. Jason texted several times in the first week, but his messages lacked any acknowledgement of what had occurred, instead asking why I had left so abruptly and telling me I had embarrassed our parents. I deleted each one without responding. With the freedom that comes from having nothing left to lose, I threw myself into my work with renewed passion. The international corporation that had commissioned my pieces loved my initial concepts and expanded the contract to include installations for 3 additional offices. This led to meetings with their art director, Thomas Reynolds, a highly respected figure in the contemporary art world who took an immediate interest in my portfolio. Thomas introduced me to curators at the Museum of Modern Art, resulting in one of my pieces being selected for their Emerging Artists exhibition. The night of the opening, I stood in disbelief as critics and collectors gathered around my work, praising the emotional depth and technical skill they saw in every brushstroke. A prominent art magazine featured my story, calling me the fresh voice modern American art has been waiting for. By the 4th month, I had earned more from my art than most people make in several years. I purchased a house in a quiet suburb, a modernist structure with a separate studio building on the property. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now owned a home worth 3 times what my brother, the financial success story, had recently purchased. Throughout this period, I worked with a therapist to process the years of emotional abuse and the complicated feelings that success brought with it. Dr. Reinhardt helped me understand that my family's treatment reflected their limitations, not my worth. We also discussed the possibility of eventually establishing new boundaries with them, though the thought still made my stomach clench with anxiety. In the 5th month, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Amanda, my sister, calling from a friend's phone because she knew I would block her number. "Alfred, please don't hang up," she began, her voice lacking its usual confident edge. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I nearly ended the call, but something in her tone made me pause. "What is it, Amanda?" "Everything has fallen apart," she said quietly. "After you left that night, Stephanie was horrified. She tried to defend you, told Jason he should have stood up to Dad. They had a huge fight, and she broke off the engagement 2 weeks later. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only sadness for what could have been. "What does this have to do with me?" Amanda took a deep breath. "That's just the beginning. Jason has been struggling at work. His drinking got worse after Stephanie left, and he made some bad investment decisions. Dad covered for him at first, but then one of their biggest clients found out and pulled their account. It started a domino effect. As she continued, the full picture emerged. The family firm was in serious trouble, with clients withdrawing their investments amid rumors of mismanagement. Jason's mistake had exposed years of my father's increasingly risky investment strategies, and now the business was on the verge of collapse. But there was more. Dad had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition requiring specialized treatment not covered by their insurance. They had always lived extravagantly, assuming the money would never run out. Now, with medical bills mounting and the business failing, they were facing financial ruin. "I didn't come looking for money," Alfred, Amanda said, surprising me. "I came to apologize. We treated you terribly. All of us. We laughed when they hurt you, and none of us stood up for you." Her voice broke. "I saw your painting in the museum. It's extraordinary. You were right to follow your passion, and we were wrong to belittle it. I just wanted you to know that some of us have learned our lesson." After she hung up, I sat in my studio staring at an unfinished canvas for hours. The path forward wasn't clear. Part of me wanted to savor their downfall, to let them experience the struggle they had always predicted for me. But another part, perhaps the better part, saw an opportunity for something more meaningful than revenge. The next day, I scheduled an additional session with Dr. Reinhardt. We talked about forgiveness not as absolution for those who hurt you, but as freedom for yourself. "If your parents came to you now needing help, what would it take for you to consider it?" she asked. I thought about it carefully. "Respect," I said finally. "Not for what I have, but for who I am. Real acknowledgement of the pain they caused, not just because they need something from me now." In the weeks that followed, I considered what rebuilding a relationship with my family might look like. I didn't want to return to the old dynamic, nor did I want to lord my success over them as some sort of revenge. What I wanted was authenticity, a family that could see and accept each other as we truly were. One evening, as I was completing a new piece for an upcoming exhibition, my security system alerted me to visitors at the gate. On the monitor, I saw my parents standing awkwardly by their car, which I noticed was no longer a Mercedes but a modest sedan several years old. I buzzed them in, watching through the windows as they approached the house with hesitant steps. When I opened the door, the shock on their faces at seeing my home and success was unmistakable. My father, once the embodiment of confidence and authority, stood in my foyer looking diminished. His expensive suit had been replaced by khakis and a button-down shirt that hung loosely on his frame. My mother, always impeccably styled, wore minimal makeup that failed to conceal the dark circles under her eyes. They took in the soaring ceilings of my home, the original artwork on the walls, many pieces by artists whose names even they would recognize, and the undeniable evidence of financial success surrounding them. "We should talk in the living room," I said, leading them through the house. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the landscaped garden and the separate studio building where I created my work. A grand piano stood in one corner, a recent indulgence, as I had started taking lessons to fulfill a childhood dream my parents had discouraged. They sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, looking out of place in the home of the son they had dismissed. For a long moment no one spoke. My father cleared his throat. "You have done well for yourself, Alfred." "Yes, I have." "We did not know, my mother," began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Your art, it is in museums now." "Among other places," I replied, not making it easier for them. I have installations in corporate headquarters across 3 continents, a waiting list of private collectors, and yes, pieces in permanent collections at several museums. My father looked down at his hands. We were wrong about you. His voice cracked on the last word, and to my astonishment, he slid from the sofa onto his knees. I have never been so wrong about anything in my life. My mother joined him, kneeling on my imported rug, tears streaming down her face. The pride and superiority that had defined her for as long as I could remember had vanished, replaced by something I had never seen in her raw vulnerability. We have lost everything, she said. The company, our home, our standing in the community. But that is not why we are here. My father looked up, his eyes red. We are here because we have also lost our son, because we threw away the relationship with our child out of arrogance and blindness. His voice broke completely. I do not deserve your forgiveness, Alfred, but I am begging for the chance to earn it. I remained silent, processing the sight of my parents literally on their knees before me. This was the moment a part of me had fantasized about during years of belittlement and rejection. Yet it brought less satisfaction than I had imagined. Instead, I felt a complex mix of vindication, pity, and the faintest flicker of hope. Get up, please, I finally said. They rose unsteadily, my father wincing as his knees straightened. I heard about your health, Dad, and about the business. He nodded grimly. The doctors say I need surgery specialized. Without it, I told your mother I came to seek peace with you, not because of that. Mom wiped her tears with the back of her hand. We saw your interview in the art magazine. You spoke about finding beauty in broken things, about how rejection shaped your perspective. She looked around the room again. We never saw what you were capable of because we were too busy measuring you against what we thought success should look like. A knock at the door interrupted us. When I opened it, Jason stood there looking as changed as our parents. Gone was the confident smirk, replaced by genuine remorse. I should have stood up for you that night, he said without preamble. I should have stood up for you our entire lives. I was a coward. The twins, who had once been inseparable, now stood as strangers, divided by years of unequal treatment and unspoken resentments. Yet looking at him, I saw not just my successful brother, but the boy who had once shared my dreams before we were taught to follow different paths. You were as trapped by their expectations as I was, just in a different way, I said. Jason shook his head. That does not excuse my silence. We moved to the kitchen, all 4 of us caught in this unexpected moment of truth. I made coffee while they sat at the island counter, the family that had once rejected me, now seeking acceptance in my home. I cannot just forgive and forget, I told them, setting down the mugs. What happened that night at dinner was just the culmination of a lifetime of pain. If we are going to have any relationship moving forward, things have to be different. Anything, my father said. Just tell us what you need. I looked at each of them in turn. Respect. Not for my money or success, but for who I am and the choices I make. Real conversations where you listen instead of judge. Boundaries that you do not cross. And complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Jason nodded immediately. Mom looked at Dad, who took a deep breath. It will not be easy to change the habits of a lifetime, but I want to try for whatever time I have left. We talked for hours that day, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. I learned that my father had been raised by a man who showed love only through achievement, that my mother had been taught that social standing was the measure of a family's worth. None of this excused their behavior, but it helped me see them as flawed humans rather than the all-powerful figures of my childhood. At the end of that first meeting, I made my decision. I will help with the medical bills, I told my father. But not because you are on your knees or because you have nowhere else to turn. I am helping because I choose to be the kind of person who helps when he can, regardless of past hurts. The relief on their faces was tempered with shame, creating an expression I had never seen on either of them. As they prepared to leave, my mother touched my arm tentatively. Stephanie asks about you, she said. She left Jason because of how we treated you, and because he did not defend you. She said she could not marry into a family that would destroy one of their own. I nodded, processing this information. Tell her I am doing well. After they left, I returned to my studio and started a new painting, working through the complex emotions of the day. The canvas began to take shape beneath my hands, depicting not a scene of triumph or revenge, but of cautious reconnection of bridges being carefully rebuilt over troubled waters. The following weeks brought careful steps toward a new kind of family relationship. My father underwent his surgery, which I paid for without conditions or reminders of my generosity. Jason found a job at a smaller firm, beginning the slow process of rebuilding his career on more solid footing. My mother started volunteering at a community art center, an irony that was not lost on any of us. We gathered for a simple dinner at my home 1 month later, joined by Amanda and her family and Brian with a new girlfriend. The conversation was sometimes awkward old patterns threatening to re-emerge before being consciously redirected. But there was also laughter, genuine interest in each other's lives, and the beginnings of mutual respect. As we finished dessert, my father raised his water glass. To second chances, he said, his voice humble. And to the son who taught this old man that success comes in many forms, all of them worthy of celebration. I think we all deserve second chances, I replied, meeting my twin brother's eyes across the table. Jason smiled, a genuine expression that reminded me of our childhood before competition had been forced upon us. Stephanie called me yesterday, he said quietly. She wanted to know if things had changed with the family, if perhaps we were learning to be better people. The hope in his voice was unmistakable. In that moment, watching my broken family begin to heal, I understood that true success had little to do with money or status. It lay in the courage to be authentically yourself, to set boundaries that protect your spirit, and to offer forgiveness not because it's deserved, but because it liberates your own heart. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with family members who hurt you deeply? How did you balance forgiveness with self-protection? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about family healing and personal growth. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in rising above others, but in rising above the pain of your past.